Okay, so I wanted to talk to you guys about presenting your work. So there will be times throughout your career when you are requested to present your work. And these can be formal or informal. So sometimes people will just ask you what it is that you do, obviously, and sometimes you need like an elevator pitch. But sometimes they want to see, you know, your portfolio, what is it you've done, and they want you to talk about it. So you are the best PR for your work and your brand, okay? So you need to get comfortable with doing this. And it's very different from presenting your work in a school setting. Oftentimes in a school setting, you have a project and they want to see, they're grading you basically. But this isn't like that, okay? So I'm going to give you some tips on how to do this. And I've also put a presentation together that you can watch and kind of get an idea of how I go about doing this. Obviously, some people do it different, and that's fine. So the first thing you want to do is you want to introduce yourself. And no matter what the setting is, you need to introduce yourself, give you a quick introduction of you and what you do. Okay, so you might be, hi, my name is Sally, and I am an interior designer and a stylist. Okay, and then you maybe have a picture of your most recent project, something that you are proud of. Okay, because depending on the situation, your audience may or may not be familiar with you or your work. They may know nothing about you, or they may be very, very familiar with your work. So you have to kind of gauge that out, and it's different from place to place, but generally it's best to start with an introduction. So I usually start, and if you've been in my classes before, you've probably seen this slide a million times. I start with, this slide, Meredith Ollinger, artist, designer, educator. And I always really liked this picture of myself. I like that you're not seeing my face. And I like that I'm working, because I really want you to focus on the work. And then I often have this slide afterwards because I like to show my artwork, some fashion design work, and then this is of me, teaching a class. So I kind of have these just stock ready to go. So another tip I have for you is to create a narrative. So a great way to approach talking about your work is to start with older work and then work up to your new work. This creates a narrative, a kind of overall arc to, you, your work, your process, your interests, what you're inspired by, things like that. Now, for some of you, this may not make sense. You may do a lot of different things, and I'm thinking about a couple of you in particular. It may make more sense to talk about your work in terms of type. So if you do a lot of different things, you may want to break it up into categories, like go through your styling work, go through your designing work, then go through your photography, something like that. Or, you can go, like I said, from old to new if it makes sense in terms of a narrative. Try not to memorize it. If you have your slideshow set up in a narrative, it's going to be easy for you to go from one slide to another, okay? So really get your slides in a good order that makes sense in a kind of story, and then that will lead you, and you can just talk about it, as the slides come up, they make sense one after another. So I generally, and you'll see this in my talk, I generally structure mine from old work to new work. Because I think if you follow the trajectory, it makes sense how I got from here to here, okay? And even now as I'm looking at it, I'm seeing some of the same motifs, this kind of leaf motif that's showing up here that's been very prevalent in my work for the past, 10 years. So that makes sense for me, and it may not for you. So you need to curate your work. There are projects and jobs and, garments, all types of work that you have done that you don't necessarily want people to see. And there are a variety of reasons why that could be so. It's not your best work. You aren't proud of it and you don't want people to see it. Don't put it in your slideshow, okay? Maybe it doesn't make sense with your work now. Maybe it's, something you used to be interested in, you're not interested in anymore, and it's going to be confusing to the viewer. You may be proud of it, but your audience will not be interested in it, okay? And that happens sometimes. I have a lot of work that I do for myself that, depending on the situation, I mean, and for me, sometimes I don't talk about my fashion design work at all, depending on who I'm talking to, because I know my audience won't care. Now, sometimes I really highlight my fashion design work because that's all they're going to care about, okay? So it varies from, location to location and who you're talking to. Also, if it's very old work, don't put it in there. You're probably not going to have a good photograph of it. It's probably not relevant. Just don't put it in. And here's an example. Now, of course, and I did a talk for you guys, and I did include this work in that talk, but oftentimes I don't. I'm proud of this work. I think it's good, and I think it's interesting, but sometimes it doesn't make sense in terms of what I do now, because my work is very colorful and big and loud, and this is not. It's quiet. It's smaller. It's muted, so sometimes it doesn't really make sense to put this in. So oftentimes I'll leave it out. Not because I don't like it, I think this is good work, but it just doesn't make sense all the time to leave it in there. Okay, and this is a big one, and one I see in a lot of you guys when you present your work. You need to be confident in your work. Never, ever, ever apologize for your work. Never apologize, okay? And never make excuses. So you are coming, you are showing your work, you've curated it, you've got great photos, you've got a great slideshow. Don't apologize. Be bold, okay? And don't point out flaws. You're going to have flaws in your work. Most people won't notice them. But once you point them out, they will notice them, and that's all that they'll see, okay? And you'll be surprised how often people do this, and you'll start hearing it in each other's work. That's like, oh, I really didn't, this isn't the best photo I could have gotten, I could have gotten a better photo, or like, oh, I really wish I'd had a little more time to work on this, or like, oh, things like that. Don't point those things out. Let other people find those things. Be confident, be bold. You're all making fabulous work, okay? Okay, so here's an example. And I've literally never told anyone this, but I'm going to tell you guys. So this piece I made in 2014. I had literally never sewn a strapless dress before. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It did not fit the model, and we had to pin it, and you can see up in here, we had to safety pin it in, and she literally was like holding it down with her arms, okay? Also, this bottom piece, it was too heavy to be sewn to the garment. So what I did was I made this kind of like under kind of suspension almost. She had something wrapped around her waist, and there was string suspending it, so it looked like it was one piece, but it wasn't. And as she was walking down the runway, it started falling down, okay? No one else noticed it, but she got back and she was like, oh my gosh, I didn't think I was gonna make it. I was like, the dress was falling apart. But like, no one noticed it. No one saw it. And you can't tell from the photo, okay? So why would I tell anyone that? I'm telling you guys because I'm giving you an example. Things go wrong, right? You make work, it doesn't always go according to plan. But that's okay. Not everyone has to know every little detail of everything. Now, sometimes that's relevant, okay? I'm telling you now, obviously, because it's relevant. But no one needs to know that, okay? So don't point out the flaws because, people looked at this dress and they were like, wow, that's amazing. I love the contrast of the bottom with the top. I love that you chose it to be strapless. And I was sitting there like nodding and smiling, just like, oh my gosh, if you had any idea, how poorly it almost all fell apart, So never apologize, be bold. Okay, and be ready for questions. So people are going to ask you questions about your work, and sometimes you won't have the answers. Try and be ready. You can anticipate some things. I've done this a lot. I know the kind of questions that people ask, and I know the kind of questions that people ask me, so I'm ready for them. But every once in a while, you get a question that you have no idea how to answer, and that's okay. Okay, try not to get flustered. Um, so a good response to that is, that's a great question, and I've never really thought about it like that before. Or that's not something that I normally consider in terms of my work. Or yeah, I'm interested in it, but not necessarily with this project. Things like that. You don't have to have an answer to everything, and you're not expected to have an answer to everything. Don't get flustered. You will the first time, but try not to get flustered. Just say, that's a great question, but I don't really have an answer for that right now. And answer honestly. Answer people honestly. Don't try to use big words or make your work into something that it's not. Be honest and open, with your process and what you're interested in and things like that. Oh, and one more thing about questions. So I put together a presentation for you guys that I'm sending you. And at the end, I'm kind of like, oh, let me take any questions, and it's a little awkward. That's not normally how I would do it. But I think when you are recording yours, and I'll just kind of click over, you are going to record a presentation of your work. Try and open it up for questions, just pretend like, oh, if you have any questions, I'd love to hear your questions. And then you can end it. Okay. So your assignment is to record a presentation of your work. Okay, put together a slideshow of the work that you've been doing, everything that you've been putting on your website and on your social media. I want you to have at least 10 slides, but you're probably going to need more. I have 32 in the one that I did, and I spoke for about 22 minutes. Now I speak quickly. You probably will too, because it's, when you perform, you tend to speed up a little bit. So depending on how much you have to say, or if you're quiet and you don't generally talk a lot, you might want to have more slides. If you have a lot to say about each image, you'll probably need less, okay? Record yourself talking about your work. I'm sending you a presentation as an example. Try to shoot for 10 minutes, 8 to 12, something like that. 10 minutes is good. I use QuickTime, QuickTime Player. So you just open QuickTime, you go to File, and click New Screen Recording, and it will just record your screen and your voice talking. You can use another program if you'd like, but I really like QuickTime a lot. So this is due Monday in the Dropbox. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Again, watch the presentation I'm sending you, and I'm also sending you another presentation by another designer that I think is really interesting. And if you have questions, just shoot me an email. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.